Welcome back to this week's episode of the Campfire Series podcast theater edition. We sure hope you enjoyed our episode yesterday with Spiro Ditas on sports. Today it is theater with Broadway performer Lily Kaufmann, who is in the current company of Mean Girls on Broadway. She was a former member of the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory first national tour. Let's get to it.
I'm currently in Mean Girls the musical, not currently necessarily, but was in Mean Girls the musical on Broadway before the shutdown happened. Before that, I did the national tour of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory for a little over a year. Have you got it on the wall back there? Heck yeah!
If you're in the first national tour, I saw you in the first national tour then in Pantages.
Yes, absolutely. That was actually my first time to California, like whatsoever. Loved playing the Pantages. It was so nice because we had been playing all these cold cities, and then LA was our first like look at the sunshine and the warmth. It was lovely. But let's see, before that, mostly summer stock. I was in college pretty much before that, so I did some summers at Music Theater Wichita, and then at Pittsburgh CLO Civic Light Opera. And worked with Broadway Dreams Foundation a little bit. So that's kind of my theatrical professional history. I went to Florida State for my training in musical theater, got my BFA there. And yeah, that's kind of me.
And also poll worker for our election as well. We can add to that repertoire.
Indeed. The resume is just slowly growing.
Well, walk me through casting for Mean Girls. Casting is always a fun time, and hearing everyone's different stories kind of cool. So tell me a little bit about yours.
Yeah, sure. My casting journey with Mean Girls was kind of a long one. It was just kind of I auditioned for the show so many times before I actually ended up getting it. My first audition for Mean Girls that went beyond kind of an open call was actually about a month after I found out that I had gotten the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory job. That was back in 2018, kind of the beginning of the year in 2018. And I was auditioning for a Vacation Swing on Broadway, and I made it kind of I made it down to the final 4 people for that audition, and I knew I had some summer stuff coming up and the Charlie tour. I didn't get that job at Mean Girls at that time, which was fine because I was excited that I had some things that were coming up, so I wasn't too stressed. It's nice to go into an audition not too stressed. And then when I came back from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I had actually missed all of the national tour auditions for Mean Girls. So there had been all of these auditions that Mean Girls was having that I just was out of town for, couldn't do. So when I came back, I knew the show was a good fit for me, just energetically and what I like to do. And so I really was getting in there to all of the open calls, like right when I got back from tour, which was just this past October, so 2019. Yeah, and so I was going to all the open calls and, telling my agent, like, if you ever see anything come up for Mean Girls, like, please get me in there if you can, and because it's been like over a year since they've seen me. So I went in for another appointment audition for Mean Girls it was Vacation Swing Universal, so goes between casts, between the tour and Broadway. And made it down kind of to the end for that as well. And then the actual audition for the role that I did get was kind of like one of those silly, or I don't know, kind of just like dream stories that sometimes you hear, where I found out the audition that morning. Like got a call from my agent at like 10 a.m. being like, you have an audition today, clear your schedule. It's at 3, it's for an immediate replacement. You will find out by tomorrow. And you will start next week if this were to work out for you. So it was one of those situations where I was like, okay, here we go. I'd been in for it a few times, so I already I knew all of the dances. I kind of knew the drill generally for auditioning for the show, so was less stressed. I was just ready. And it was just 7 of us in the audition. You could tell it was really one of those last minute things where they were bringing in a really small group because they knew exactly what they were looking for, and they had had so many auditions for it recently that they had in the books, you know, who was going to be good to be brought in. So there were 7 of us, and we all did 3 dances. We all sang. It was all videotaped for Casey Nicola and Tina Fey and everyone. And then they kept me and one other girl to stay and read, to sing for Janice. And at the time I was like, what is this about? Like, I'm assuming this is something Janice related. But we really didn't have much information. They just kind of were like, here's your 2 songs, you're gonna sing them. And me and that girl, who were kind of the last 2 there that day, we ended up going for drinks afterwards because we were so stressed. We had it was a long audition process and very vigorous since it was such a small group. You know, you kind of had to be just like on and ready to go the whole time, and learning the songs last minute and singing them last minute. And I'm sure you know the show, the Janice material is not the easiest vocally. So it was kind of a crazy, like, throw at you thing in the room, but, you know, classic audition, got to just be ready for whatever. And I found out the next day that I got the job. It was a replacement for an injury, somebody who was in the ensemble and understudied Janice. So I, you know, quickly figured out that was why I had to do all that material. Yeah, and I started like maybe 5 days after that. I started rehearsals. So, yeah.
Well, I know it's obviously a little bit late now, but congratulations on that. But also, I think you're in a pretty cool club. Obviously, not only being on Broadway, but you had a very tight window of whether finding out whether you got the part or not. So I think that's got to be somewhat good compared to people that wait months and months. But obviously, you've been through the long audition process, so kudos to that. And I'm sure Mean Girls has been awesome to you. But walk me through rehearsals a little bit, because you know, all of us pay attention to, you know, the rehearsal process of putting up a show at the beginning of its run. You're being put into a show that's already, you know, it's been established for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
So walk me a little bit through the rehearsal process.
Yeah, absolutely. This was my first experience being put into a show that's already been up for a long time. So it was totally a new thing to me as well, and a little bit scary to begin with. So the way it kind of works when you're being replaced and put into a show that's already running, especially a dance heavy show, for me, it looked like started off with, I had 1 music rehearsal, which was a day, like a full day with the music director, and just learned everything. And it was very quick. The whole process is pretty quick being put into a show. Usually you have 2 or 3 weeks of rehearsal. I was lucky, I had 3. And so not a whole lot of time for like making sure that it's sunk in and making sure you've got it. It really is just like, they're teaching it to you, you're recording on your phone, and then you're going home and doing your homework that night and going over everything. So had 1 day of music rehearsals, went through literally everything in the show, and went through all of the Janice stuff. Just the vocal, you know, plunking through stuff, harmonies, all of that, different things. And then we jumped right into dance rehearsals, and that was with the dance captain and the associate dance captain. Generally, both of them were in the room with me. What became a little funky was that the dance captain, Becca Peterson, is also a cover of like all of the leads. And at that time, Erica Henningsen, who was playing Katie, was doing double duty. She was transitioning into her other Broadway show. So she couldn't do matinees. And then also people were calling out. And so the person who covered Janice and Katie was going in for this role. So Becca was being needed to play these roles on Broadway all the time during our rehearsals. So she would find out, like, you know, 20 minutes before our rehearsal was scheduled to start, that she had to go do the show that night. And so a lot of the times I was just working with the associate, just kind of depended. And those were just like hours, usually like 4 hours at a time of just going through the dances. And what was kind of weird and cool and interesting, and I'm like so grateful for in retrospect about my experience when I came into Mean Girls, is that they were actually transitioning the show from the tour into the Broadway company. So they're implementing all of the changes that they made for the tour onto the Broadway company, which to my understanding is kind of pretty rare, especially for a Broadway company that's been up and running for a couple of years to implement a bunch of changes that late into the run. And so they timed it very specifically where they were doing it when there was a changeover in a lot of principals. So we were getting a new Janice, we were getting a new Damien, we were getting a new Katie, we were getting a new Karen, all of these new people coming into the show. And so they purposefully were like, we're not going to make all of these older cast members learn a brand new show that, you know, is different from what they've been doing 8 shows a week for, you know, some of them 3 years if they did the tryout. So what was lucky about that is that I learned all of the material that was not changing with the dance captains. But all of the material that was changing, I got to learn with the entire cast in a rehearsal studio with the entire cast. And they were all learning new stuff, new lyrics, new harmonies, new dance moves, giant cuts of verses here and there, new scenes. Like they changed a lot for the tour. And so all of this was being implemented into the Broadway company, I assume for continuity's sake, so that someone that would be like a universal swing would be able to bop between them. And I also think maybe they just liked the changes that they made for the tour. So that was really lucky because I got to learn in the way that you would normally learn a show from the beginning, which is where you do it over and over until everybody's getting it. You know, you're learning it slowly. I'm getting to see people around me. That was the biggest thing, especially with a show like Mean Girls, where the ensemble does a lot and there's a lot of traffic patterns, both on stage and backstage, which was a whole other story. There's a whole lot of traffic patterns. So when you're learning it alone in a rehearsal studio just with, you know, 1 or 2 dance captains, it's so hard to get a feel for where you are in space, you know, in connection with the people around you, you know, where you fit on the stage in the puzzle and who you go in front of and behind and what chair you sit down on next to this person on your left and this person on your right. And then you go upstage of them for this transition, kind of all of those little idiosyncrasies that I had never experienced before because I've never been put into a show like that. But you have to kind of imagine it and they're just like, okay, and you'll go behind this person and that person, then you'll go in front of this person and make sure you're to the left shoulder of that person. Otherwise they will run into you, you know, those kinds of things that when I did get those, you know, couple moments of the show that were changing, I got to actually feel that with the entire cast. And just on a personal level, I got to like bond with people, which of course, you know, can be tough when people have been in a show with each other for so long. They have these wonderful friendships and connections, and so it was a blessing to be able to start to kind of form those, getting to know people in a learning setting where everybody was feeling a little jittery. And then my opening night was the opening night of all the changes, so everyone was like trying to like, no one was on autopilot that night, you know? So that was cool too, because I wasn't the only one that was, you know, being thrown into the mix. Everyone was kind of feeling the reopening jitters, and we literally had a reopening party. So that was cool too.
Well, I think it's cool that you know, you bonded so closely with the castmates, especially now, because I'm sure y'all probably have like a group chat or something, just trying to stay close or, you know, doing stuff like that. But I want to hear something kind of crazy. This is obviously it's going to change once the pandemic is over, but walk me through the New York life. I know, you know, living in New York City is hard, but also you're doing shows 8 times a week. And what are things that you do to take care of yourself physically and mentally? And also there's the temptation of going out for drinks after the show sometimes that, you know, a lot of probably performers probably do. And having that mental decision of like, hey, do I do it or do I not? Do I have a day where I sleep? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally. I think, you know, when you have a job like being an actor, especially being an actor on Broadway, you kind of step into this role that is a little bit larger than life. And with that kind of role comes some of these responsibilities that are a little bit less exciting and fun than you would maybe think. So definitely part of that is taking care of yourself. Your health is just number one when it comes to performing a show 8 times a week. Just physically, you have to be ready to sing and dance and run around backstage and change your clothes and not get other people around you sick, and all of these kind of factors that go into being able to do your job, which is, more than some jobs. You can have a little cough, have a little, be feeling a little icky physically and get through the day. But it's really a challenge doing a show in those circumstances. So as far as like maintaining that health goes, I definitely think that drinking less alcohol is like a huge one. I know for me especially, that really affects my voice the next day, just super dehydrating, which is not fun sometimes. And then there are times where I'm feeling great and I don't have a show the next day until 8 p.m. and I'm like, you know what, I think I'll be okay for a drink after this show and I'll be able to sleep in tomorrow. So I'll be able to I'm someone that needs 8 hours of sleep. And so I always am making sure that above all else, I'm allotting at least 8 hours of sleep. Physically, otherwise, of course, exercising is great. I got really into yoga when I was on tour. It just aligns really well with dancing kind of in general, but also I think just life. I mean, I don't want to preach yoga to you today, but like just balance, strength, flexibility, all of those kinds of principles that kind of are at the core of yoga, but also connecting with the mind body connection and connecting with yourself and your heart and how you're feeling today and being present in this moment, taking time to, like, especially in New York City where it's go go go, you're thinking about the next thing and what you have to do in an hour and how much time it's going to take you to walk to the train, to get on the train, and what if the train's late, you need to allot the time. There's so many ifs, ands, or buts. So yoga for me was like a really good way to just let it all go for a little bit, take some me time, let my anxiety levels lower, let my cortisol levels lower, allow my nervous system to flip into a restful state, kind of take a little meditation time. That became really important for me. But that was kind of a learned thing, and I was slowly getting to know that more and more during my time in New York. And then just like fun little tips and tricks. Everybody probably says this, but tea, lemon, honey. I throw a couple drops of oregano oil, which is spicy, girl, but it works really well if you dilute it with something, like put it in some tea or some water. I do like a concoction of emergency, couple drops of oregano oil, and either echinacea, or I have this stuff called immunoberry, which has elderberry in it. So those are all really good immunity items. And so I kind of mix them into a little concoction. I try to do like as little water in there as possible just to shoot it and get it down. And when I'm really staying on my game, I'll do that, just one of those in the morning. And that knocks a lot, especially if you're starting to feel a little tickle in the throat or something like that. Sleep, eating healthy, exercising. It's crazy how those simple things that everybody says make such a difference on your health. I watched my health get so much better when I actually started prioritizing those things. And then, so then once you can kind of start to regulate all of that and put it into your daily practice, it kind of becomes your lifestyle and you feel better, you feel more energized. And then of course you can do your job better.
It's perfect prioritizing, you know what I mean? Especially when you have all this awesome stuff and all these awesome responsibilities as a performer. Here's another, I don't know if this is a priority for most actors and actresses, but some nights you go to stage doors, some nights you don't, because it's just not one of those nights. But walk me through some stage door stories and how maybe it differs a little bit on a national tour, where sometimes there isn't really a setup for going to stage door. Oh, it's just the door. Oh, people are waiting out here, as opposed to, some theaters, and especially like at the August Wilson, where they got barricades and security guards, and you're on the street. So you're on 52nd or wherever. I forget what street the August Wilson's on, but you know what I mean? Walk me through those kind of things.
Very good. Yeah, you know, I don't have a lot of like crazy stage door stories, but because what I can tell you about my time in Mean Girls is that Sabrina Carpenter started playing Katie when I came into the show, and she is a big Disney Channel star. And so it became kind of a cool, like, fangirl stage door time. at the August Wilson. So I was by no means like a popular commodity at the August Wilson during those times, which was totally fine with me. Of course, you sign people's playbills. But what I'll also say is that pretty soon after I got there, they implemented no stage dooring anymore because I really was there close to COVID time. And so when it came to Mean Girls, I really don't have a lot of stories of stage dooring because they literally didn't allow it when I was there, and that became sad. I couldn't take people backstage either, which was sad, of course, because I wanted to, like, you know, show all my little friends and family that came to the show and take them backstage on Broadway and all the different things. But that quickly became not allowed too because it's so tight backstage, and you know, they just started really becoming conscious and aware of the impending stress of the coronavirus. It was kind of a hot topic at the August Wilson when I was there. You know, it was kind of backstage. We had so many hand sanitizer pumps, and there were so many backstage like fun handshakes that are like kind of like tracked into the track. Like when I learned my track, they were like, okay, and here's where you'll give a high five to this stagehand, and over here you give a chest bump to this cast member on your way to cross the stage. You know, all that kind of stuff got also kind of nixed, which was sad. People started doing like little elbow things or, you know, whatever. But all of that kind of stuff when I was there, you know, really started becoming not allowed, which is interesting and an interesting part of my memories and experience there. But, you know, it just kind of is what it is and was what it was. For Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, it's interesting, you know, some cities there would be barricades. Like LA is a great example. We had full barricades. We had lines of people after every show with playbills and signing, you know, all the normal stuff. And then certain cities where no one was really there, no one really cared, which I thought was interesting. And you know, I understudied Veruca in the Charlie tour. So anytime I was on for Veruca, I had a lot of stage door kind of fun because I actually really look like the girl who plays Veruca. Like our face kind of looks similar, even though she has like short dark hair. But also I think because I'm blonde and ish and sort of the vibe of Veruca, people just thought I was Veruca always. So that was kind of an awkward thing. People would always be like, Veruca, come sign. I'd be like, it became like a running joke with me and my friends. I was like, do I just pretend that I was so that I don't ruin their fun? Probably not, but also like, maybe, you know, because I kind of would just be like, oh, I'm glad you enjoyed the show, and then sign my name and call it a day. At first I would tell people like, oh, that's not me. But the girl who played Veruca didn't usually stage door. So after a while, I kind of started to just be like, you know what? It'll make them happy if they think they saw Veruca. And you know what? I do understudy her. So the first time I went on and came outside and actually had people be like, that's Veruca, I was like, you guys, I actually was Veruca this time. Woohoo! Yeah, and I will say the guy who played Willy Wonka, Noah Weisberg, he was especially lovely. He allotted time after every show to stage door, and especially if there was anyone there with handicaps or disabilities or anything, he really took time to stay with them and listen to them and hang out with them. And so I started to like learn from him in that way and do that as well. And he was just such a wonderful role model when it came to stage dooring. That being said, I totally understand people that don't want to stage door because we have a hard job that we have to rest for and be ready for and be healthy for all the audience 8 times a week. So it's totally a personal thing. And yeah.
And unfortunately, I think that's going to be one of the things that we sacrifice when we come back. But I think it's just, you know, there's bigger things right now than a playbill at the end of the show, quite frankly. But walk me through, I mean, obviously nothing is set in stone because we're learning things every couple of weeks, every couple of days about COVID, and it's a shame we don't get more media coverage or anything about theater, which is very sad. That's a whole different soapbox rant, but I won't go on that right now. But
Sure.
where do you think Mean Girls and Broadway is gonna be when we come back? But also, where's Mean Girls gonna be? Because they're constantly, updating stuff. Do you think they're gonna get any more updates or anything like that?
Huh. So, a few things I know. I mean, we've had a few Zoom calls with the team, the creative team, Tina Fey, the producers, especially towards the beginning of the shutdown, and everybody is just super confident and excited about Mean Girls coming back to Broadway when Broadway does reopen. And I think that the changes that got implemented are going to be really confusing, but they'll probably be what sticks when we come back. We'll probably go back to those changes, but the cast just didn't have very long with those changes before the shutdown happened, and so I think it's going to take a lot of rehearsal before the show can reopen, which I'm sure will be the case with most shows that do reopen, because it's crazy. I mean, like, every once in a while I'll throw on one of the songs and do the choreography and I'll be like, oh, wait, what what comes next? And I wasn't doing, a different show for 2 or 3 years like some of these cast members were before they flipped over to the new show. And so I imagine that it will be the new show that comes back, and that I assume no crazy changes are going to be made, although I have no idea with who the cast will be. I really don't. We were seeing some changeover again right when I got there. There was a lot of changeover, but even that month that I started, we were supposed to lose like 4 or 5 cast members, and some of them were just leaving to leave. Some of them were leaving to do other shows, and so I think it'll be really interesting to see who is in the show when it comes back, and who will be moving on to their other projects, or some of those projects might be pushed back so maybe they can stay a little longer. All of that is super up in the air. The contracts are super up in the air. Everything is so unprecedented. There's nothing in the contracts that really covers this kind of situation, and so I don't have a lot of knowledge about what the cast will look like, or what, when it's going to come back. I mean, right now Broadway is slated to open in June, and I'm feeling maybe next fall. That's what I'm thinking, probably, if I'm being grossly realistic, which is been such a drag. I keep being like, well, it'll be a couple months, okay, a couple months after, but maybe a few months after that. And now I'm kind of just like, all right, I surrender. I really do think it'll be probably next fall, which is so crazy, but it's so sad. Broadway is the worst industry when it comes to social distancing guidelines and, being careful about COVID. Everybody is so packed in that theater, both in the audience and backstage. And the tough thing is that those shows cost so much to put on that they can't really operate. Most shows can't really operate with a partial audience. Shows that are making a lot of money off of like one ticket, like Hamilton, probably could do something like that. But most shows, the rent in these New York houses, to pay all of the many staff, both on the stage and off, to just run the show, costs a lot. And so I do think that certain shows aren't going to be able to come back until they can safely pack a bunch of people in there. I think maybe people in the audience will be required to wear masks. I think that the lines outside the doors, they're going to have to figure out how to, bring people in groups, in small groups, maybe have different designated times that you show up to the theater to get to your seat. I wonder about the bathrooms. I mean, dang, when you go to a show at intermission, that bathroom line is cray-cray. I remember, because I would watch from the house when I was learning Mean Girls, and I, 2 minutes before the end of Act 1, I would run to the bathroom when I was watching from the house, because I wanted to beat the giant line. And so all of those things are going to have to be mitigated. And I know New York is resilient. Broadway is resilient. It's my favorite thing about New York City, and it's the reason that I will be back, and the reason that I love it. It gives this fighting energy to you and to everyone that decides to bear the task of taking on living in that city. And so I'm confident that Broadway's going to figure it out. They're going to figure out ways to manage all of these issues. But I do think that there's going to have to be a vaccine. It's going to have to be administered to a lot of people. And especially for the people that are on stage, I mean, like, that's tough too. We can't wear masks. We can't wear masks on stage, I don't think. So I do think it's going to look very different, especially for the audience. I do think that stage dooring is probably going to not happen. It'll be interesting to see what happens with backstage tours. And it'll be different for touring productions because those houses have so much more space. That's something I can say for certain after doing tour and then Broadway. There's just no space in those Broadway houses. Everything is so packed, just like everything in New York City, stacked on top of each other and squished in. Oh my God, that's a whole different story. But when I was trailing backstage to watch the show and watch where my person, what, costume person they went to on this part and where they changed over here and what wig they got on over which direction, that was crazy. I was constantly in the way. There was zero space for me. So I would be like up against a wall and they'd be like, nope, we're putting a set piece there. And I'd be like, oh, sorry, okay. And I'd like huddle in a corner and they'd be like, nope, Karen's coming there to quick change. And I'd be like, oh, okay. And I'd run over to the other side. Like, I truly was constantly like, whoop, ha, because there's just no extra space. There's no space backstage. And so, like, I really think that touring shows are going to come back before Broadway. I think that shows in houses that have more space will be able to come back earlier. And, there are already theaters that are, that are housing union actors that are complying with guidelines and making it happen and making art. And so it's already starting to come back. But I do think that Broadway is going to be the last one, unfortunately.
But it's going to be stronger and we're going to be tougher and tighter than ever. But just before we wrap up, first of all, I once again want to say thank you for coming on and taking some time out of your day, sharing some stories. Someone told me if you ask the person the right questions, they'll talk a lot and get on a soapbox and be awesome. And that's what I want. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate that. But at the beginning when I started this show, the advice would be so different than now, but some would be the same because we're now going into a post-pandemic world, hopefully soon. And the world of theater is going to be so different, as well as the level of competitiveness and the amount of people that are going to try and get into musical theater programs in colleges and, with any sort of work, because the last thing people want to do right now is hire when money is just so tight. So what's throwing a lot at you, but what's just some advice you can give to young aspiring performers of all ages, from 2 to 80, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh. So art is larger than life. Art is larger than this pandemic. It's the most transcendent thing I think that exists in the world. People turn to art when they're feeling afraid and confused. People turn to art when they're feeling excited and effervescent, and all of us will continue to create art. And so if you feel inspired and you feel alive when you do theater or when you make music or do any of these kind of artistic pursuits like I do, there's no reason to let this time stifle that inside of you. I mean, it's resilient and it's always going to be, and it's always going to be there for you. I do think that being, flexible, being someone who's thinking of new ways to make art happen, those kinds of, moldable personalities and people that can think in new ways are going to be the trendsetters and are going to pave the way for the new artistic world as we know it. And so if you can be creative in how you display your art or create your art. I think that is going to be a super useful tool as we enter into the post COVID world. I think that theater will be back, and we'll be back in the same regard. There's going to be tons of theater jobs that are out there. It just might not be for a while. And so if doing theater now is part of what you need, I think we've got to figure out a way to make it a part of our life that we don't need to make our entire, maybe monetary life. I've had to make those adjustments, and a lot of people have had to make those adjustments, and my entire life's focus has been theater. And this has been the first time where I've really had to ask myself, well, what else do I enjoy? What else brings me life? What else lights the fire in my soul like theater does? Because I've never asked myself that question before, really, truly. And so to take that time, if you're someone like me who is just alive when they get to perform or do theater or be artistic in any way, thinking of new ways that you can express your art and share your art and make sure that you're still filling your soul in that way. And then really taking the time to ask yourself, like, what else do I love? Is there something that I can bring to the art world or the theater world that combines something of my skill set or something else that I'm interested in? I'm thinking about learning yoga for singers, like starting to figure out how to incorporate yogic practices for a singer, so that's just kind of a strange example of how I'm trying to bring in a part of my life that I also enjoy, that I've never really given too much thought or time to, into my artistic pursuits, and kind of getting creative, like coming up with new ways to have a job, to fill my spirit, and just don't give up. Like, don't give up because of all that's going on right now. It will be back. Everything will be back. It just is going to take a while. And so during this time is the perfect time to explore in new ways, try something you've never done, pick up an instrument you've never done, and get creative about how you hashtag art. Because I think that it's in these trying times that we come up with the coolest things and the coolest ways to overcome, because we have no other choice. So I just give you my blessing and my applause if you decide to try that and decide to follow your passions, because it will be back. Everything will be, and you'll have a place here in the theatrical world.
Find your hashtag art. I like that, and that will be the motto of this episode. But Lily, I really appreciate you coming on, and that was just so much fun. Just hearing about everything. I think you hit it at the head. This last thought you said, people turn to the arts for enjoyment, and they need it, but people don't realize sometimes in a pre-pandemic world that includes holidays. So enjoy the holidays this year. You don't have to perform on the big days.
Exactly. I really am cherishing this time. It's weird, but yeah, there's always a silver lining, even in this weird, stupid time.
Exactly. Well, good luck working the polls. Sending you all the thoughts and prayers for that. That's going to be a fun time. And I'll let you know when this episode drops. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, stay positive, and stay listening to them, the Mean Girls albums, and trying to remember the choreography from, like 3 years ago or whenever it was this pandemic started.
Thank you. You asked amazing questions, and you're super friendly and made me feel very at home. So,
well, I appreciate that. I really do. I'm glad I could do that for you.
Yeah.
But also just need to comment on the chair. Love the chair.
Oh, thank you. Give a little pop of color to my all black New York vibe.
Exactly. There we go. Well, you have a terrific day, terrific rest of your week. And really in this week, stay safe.
I shall. You too.
Appreciate that. Have a great day.
You too.
Nice meeting you. Bye.